So we graft apple trees because if we plant an apple from seed, we won't get the apple we want. And so if we want to preserve the fruit quality and the characteristics of the tree that we want to grow, we need to graft it. And what grafting means is we take the top of the tree that has the fruit that we want, and we take a part of that and we graft it onto rootstock, which becomes the root of the tree. And situations we do this in are anything where, say, we want to grow Honeycrisp and we want to make sure it's a Honeycrisp. We don't plant it from seed, we graft it onto a rootstock that has the size and cold hardy characteristics we want, and then we get all the characteristics of the tree that we desire. So both the fruit quality as well as the rootstock's ability to make the tree a certain size and help it be cold hardy. So the first step in bud grafting a tree is to collect your budwood. And budwood basically is the wood that you're going to collect from the tree that you want the fruit from. So it's the tree that has that really juicy, beautiful, red, flavorful apple that doesn't have diseases and has survived Montana's winters for a long, long time. Budwood, though, isn't just any part of the tree, it's actually this year's growth. And how you tell this year's growth from, say, last year's growth or the year before on a tree is to look for something called the leaf scars. And this is a ring of sort of indentations as you move towards the trunk of the tree, where you can see last year's bud, there was a ring of leaves and those fell off and the new year's bud grew. And then that year we also start to form buds in. And so from here up is 1 year's growth, and that's this year. But all we're really interested in for this is this section right here, which was what we would collect our budwood from for grafting. However, on a lot of heritage orchard trees, it's pretty puny. This isn't too bad, but it's pretty thin, and it would be hard to graft from this. And so what I often look for on trees are water sprouts and areas where there was a lot of intense vegetative growth this year. And so if we look up into this tree, you can see right here, this is just a single year's growth. It's nice and round and thick. It's also not too furry. The furrier we get, the less mature the buds are. And we want to graft from buds that look like this. And that can be hard on heritage trees because the older the trees are, the less growth they have. But one thing we can do is prune them the year before. That instigates some of this vegetative growth, and then we'll get more what we call these water sprouts that are often really great for grafting. Once I've trimmed my budwood off the tree, I also cut off the leaves, leaving a little bit of petiole, because that becomes a handy handle when I'm grafting, as you'll see in a little bit. And the bud itself is actually just right behind the petiole, waiting for spring. Behind me is rootstock that we're using to graft heritage orchard trees onto, and I'm going to show you how that process is done. There are several different types of grafting, but what we're doing today is called chip or bud grafting. So this is what your budwood's going to look like after you've collected it. You want to keep it wrapped in a moist towel and cool until you're ready to use it, because the biggest thing about grafting is that you need to keep your budwood fresh and you need to keep things from drying out. And so when we graft, we're going to graft onto the north side of the tree that we are grafting onto. This is the rootstock. This rootstock can control the size of the tree, as well as offers cold hardiness and some disease resistance to the rooting part of the tree. So I'm grafting onto the north side so that it stays protected from the wind as well as the sun, and doesn't dry out as easily, but also doesn't wake up, because we graft in the beginning to middle of August in Montana, so that the bud has time to heal, but it doesn't start to wake up too early. If we grafted too early, then we might get the bud to wake up and then it could get hurt by winter injury or cold injury in the wintertime. But my first cut is down at a 45-degree angle, about ½ a centimeter from where the bud is. And the bud is right behind the leaf, like we talked about when we collected the budwood. And then about 1 centimeter above it, I make a shallow cut. And you usually have to wiggle your knife just a little bit as you get to the bud. It's a little harder there. And then I set this aside. I like to keep a handy cooler nearby where my extra budwood is, and it provides a clean surface to work with. I want to graft high enough from the soil line so that my graft doesn't get buried, because if it gets buried, especially as the tree grows, the rootstock will be replaced by the tree's natural rootstock. And I don't want that. I want the rootstock to control the size of the tree and the cold hardness, yada yada, and the scion to just be independent of that. And so I go about 3 to 4 fingers up, and I make a little pocket cut, which is that same sort of 45-degree cut I made earlier on the budwood. And then at about the same size as I made the budwood, I can trim off a little bit of the rootstock. And I want it to match up really nicely with the budwood I cut. And so I've got my little petiole handle, because I don't want to touch this area here, because this has the cambium that makes the connection between the rootstock and the scion to grow the new tree. It's the vascular system of the tree. And I tuck it down into the pocket I made. And then sometimes I'm not perfect, and so I have to do a little trimming so that it all matches up. So I didn't make it quite long enough, and so I'm just gonna trim off a little more of the rootstock so that it all matches up, the cambium layers of the rootstock and the scion. And then I trim off my petiole because I don't need that much of it. And then I get out my tape. But what you want to make sure of is that you are holding the graft in place, or the bud in place, really tightly, and that you're sealing it so that it doesn't lose moisture, it doesn't dry out. And I'll come back in a couple of days and look, and I should see condensation underneath this tape. And that's how I know that I sealed in the moisture well. It's a good thing to see a couple little droplets of water in there. And it doesn't matter if you wrap from the top or the bottom. It just matters that you get a good, nice seal. So as I mentioned, we typically chip or bud graft in August. And the next spring, you're going to take the tape off of your tree in April. And then when you see that that bud is starting to grow and is alive, you're going to trim it, trim the rootstock off of the tree right above the bud. And when you do that, then this bud is going to grow, and it's going to grow a lot the first year. So this tree was grafted last August. So this is 1 year's growth. And as it starts to grow, you want to kind of protect that graft from the wind. And so what we do is we have a little, it's called a grow straight. But a homeowner could just use a stick or a stake that the tree then, as it gets old enough, can be attached to. And you go ahead and you just let it grow for a year. As it grows though, sometimes it puts off little branches, and you want to pinch those off so that the tree continues to grow and you have a trunk area that is naked lower down. And then eventually your tree is going to look like this. And this tree is actually 2 years old. And as you can tell, this is where we cut it off from the rootstock, or cut the rootstock off from to let the scion grow. And we picked off all of those lower buds so that we had a bare area of the trunk. And now we're allowing it to form lateral branches, and pretty soon it will be producing fruit. How soon it produces fruit depends on the rootstock and how you train it. Also, we've painted this bottom area so that it's protected from sun scald, which is injury that happens in the wintertime.